And last of all, after that movie review and a bit of music review, a book review, as promised. Now, let me share this book. I was initially uncertain about whether to reveal the title of the author of this book, and it seemed unwise as he has quite enough, shall we say, advertising space, quite enough publicity without me giving any more. But given the complete, well, silliness of tigers and lions breathing together being used as an example earlier, I think it's fair to say that this can be used to showcase the bizarre stuff that pops up with him. This is the equalitarian dogma with that lovely subtitle on there. Why ideology and not science dominates debate on ethnicity and race in the modern world. Simon Webb. This book was made possible by a generous grant from the Connery Foundation, a foundation that people, for some reason, don't like mentioned. Now, towards the end of this book, about page 385, we start hearing talk about Homo sapiens plus versus Homo sapiens, which gets very odd and strange. Let's go from here. Looking at illustration 21, we can see the sort of art produced by the Homo sapiens before they left Africa. These are nothing more than doodles. So we're presuming we've summed up all art there. Must be a heck of a lot of art before Homo sapiens left Africa, consisting of scratches which signify little other than vague awareness of the concept of symmetry in what will one day become Europe. The Neanderthals who lived there before the coming of the hybrids were also producing nothing more than similar random scratches and the occasional pattern of straight lines on the wall of a cave. Somehow I feel there's probably a bit more to the story of Neanderthal art than that. And I'll be looking for some links to put underneath this. This, meanwhile, is red ochre from Blomberg Cave with some scratches on it. Now, of course, we have no way of knowing what those scratches were. God knows what they might have been. They might have had particular meaning to the person who scratched it on there. They may not be just random scratches. That's an assumption made by the author. Within a few years of the arrival of what we might as well call Homo sapiens plus, and that plus sign is doing a heck of a lot of heavy lifting in this document, and a heck of a lot of euphemistic heavy lifting. And I think we can probably guess as we go on what the plus sign is referring to. In Europe, works of art like that seen in illustration 22 were being crafted. It is obvious that whoever made this strange object was quite simply on a different intellectual plane from those who have gone before. Well, not based on a couple of examples, it's not. We need a lot more discussion than that and a lot more examples presented to us than a couple. 2 examples is rather meaningless. If you can provide us, well, I don't know, 40 or 50 and a range of experts and broaden the discussion out, we might agree with you and we might not. But in any case, for one thing, this figure known as the Lion Man is representative rather than merely decorative. It is meant to portray something. Not only that, it is meant to show us something, not in the real world. How do you know figure 21 wasn't meant to portray something? That's an author's assumption again. But continuing, it's a figure which existed only in the mind of the creator. Neither she had ever seen a man with the head of a lion. Well, unless they had been engaging in quite a lot of illicit substances. It had been imagined, and then the pure thought had somehow been made manifest for all to see. This achievement, showing in solid form an image which had been conjured up in another person's mind, showed the immeasurable gulf which separated Homo sapiens plus from their ancestors. And here's the figure for the next one, figure 22, the Lion Man. Now, just to broaden this out, and to be fair, when I get to the end of it, I'm going to try and find some links to Neanderthal art so we can stick them in as links. So I can't be accused of the same using a couple of things approach. The new breed of humans took the world by storm, and as they spread out across Asia and Europe, innovation and invention became their hallmark. They began building permanent homes, growing crops, and before long the stage was set for the rise to civilization. The Aboriginal inhabitants of the continents which they invaded were wholly unable to compete with the incomers. Those older species, who we know today as the Neanderthals and Homo erectus, found themselves outclassed at all levels and faded quietly away. I'm sure there's a bigger discussion we could have on that bit as well, but we'll leave that aside for now. The human population which had stayed behind in Africa simply stagnated. I'm going to read that out again. The human population which had stayed behind in Africa simply stagnated. This is the Simon Webb summation of 50,000 years of African history. The human population which had stayed behind in Africa simply stagnated. It's a you can't really overstate how sweeping a generalization that is. But moving on, over the next 50,000 years, in which Homo sapiens plus, again the plus is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I'm feeling quite sorry for that little plus. Moved from the Stone Age to the Industrial Revolution with its steam engines, blast furnaces, and telegraphs. The root stock of modern humanity, the original Homo sapiens, remained for the most part in the Stone Age, where they had been when those first explorers entered the Middle East and encountered for the first time their Neanderthal cousins. It does not take a very extensive grasp of history. Well, there doesn't seem to be a very extensive grasp of history going on here. Now, there's plenty of history in Africa. Just because Simon doesn't choose to mention it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The idea that there was no history in sub-Saharan Africa, and you'll notice that a lot of these far-right bloggers keep using this term sub-Sahara. It's another word they get to do a lot of heavy lifting, sub-Sahara. It must be getting quite tired. But let's start again from that paragraph. It does not take a very extensive grasp of history to see that no human invention since the stone hand axe and possibly the bone harpoon for fishing originated in Africa. The harpoon, which might have first have been devised in Africa, has been around for over 35,000 years. Yes, and are you really seriously arguing, Mr. Webb, that for 50,000 years, there was no development of any kind in Africa? Righto. I think that's time for for me to turn it over to some other voices, be a links afterwards, but it's becoming quite ridiculous, but nevertheless, since that time, nothing more has been invented by the original Homo sapiens in their homeland. Why have we got the original Homo sapiens? We now have this divide between Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens plus. Well, we seem to have entered some strange world akin to science fiction or a comic where we have Homo sapiens and then Homo sapiens plus who have outstripped the original Homo sapiens. It seems a rather odd fantasy based in, well, quite frankly, master race type theories. Everything from the wheel cart and written word to jet planes and smartphones has been invented by those whose origins lie in Europe, the group who we have called Homo sapiens plus. And who is this group called Homo sapiens plus? Everyone is welcome to reply and give their ideas in the comments as to whom Homo sapiens plus is. I think I don't really need to point it out too much. I think you'll get what my finger is doing there. The population of unadulterated Homo sapiens, which has lived in Africa for perhaps as long as 200,000 years, has not come up with any new ideas since the Stone Age. This time frame is growing more and more. We'll be back to the antediluvian age, or back to the Big Bang at this rate. This is, not surprisingly, a book I couldn't imagine any publisher really wanting to handle, because it's coming out with bizarre stuff that harks back to the kind of pseudo-racist nonsense that you got in the late Victorian era and which underlay the eugenics movement and so on. Now, unfortunately, by reviewing it, I've also given the author a bit of publicity, but in a way that may work against him, considering the bizarre nonsense with tigers and lions breathing together, which he used earlier, which motivated me to actually reveal the name rather than say just a book. Because if you're going to go with that understanding of genetics and not even look up the problems of breeding between two such animals and the ethical concerns, it suggests the issues with this book are probably multiple. It's a very strange and odd and worrying work, and I'm sure there are hundreds of them out there. I'm not going to name them because there are infamous works like this out there, and that's as much as I want to deal with it. And I'd like to. It's a nicky work that I'd rather not touch again after this. I've read about 50 or 60% of it, and it makes my brain hurt to read it, quite frankly. It's such a strange and odd work, but I'll leave it there. Now, um, I think it's indicative of the well, I apologize for even using this word to the people who really use published by this system in the past, but it's a Zamizdat culture of far right creators pushing old and tired master race theories out in this strange way for their devout followers to consume. You can, of course, read it if you like. You may enjoy it. I certainly did not. I found it very strange and bizarre.